Over 6 million Americans live within 3 miles of one of these. I'm one of them. I actually live within 3 miles of 2 different refineries. And yet, before researching this video, I didn't really know what went on at an oil refinery. I mean, I knew crude oil went in and gasoline at some point came out, but how does that happen? Why are these refineries so massive, and why are they so close to urban areas? Oil comes from the ground. It's then pumped out of the ground, then piped to a refinery. These refineries are generally located in one of 2 places, either where the oil was drilled, like the Sinclair refinery in Wyoming, or near a port where refined products can be shipped out. This is why oil refineries are often so close to big cities, because cities are often at the mouths of navigable rivers or by huge ports. Cities also have a large labor pool that refineries can draw from. There are refineries everywhere. They exist on every continent besides Antarctica and in almost every major developed country. And although every refinery is different, virtually all of them work the same way. Let's learn how. Crude oil arrives at the refinery. It's generally stored in one of these big tanks until it's ready to be distilled in what's called a CDU, or a crude distillation unit. Crude is piped into the unit and then it's heated. This is the most important step because it separates all the different components of crude oil. At around 105 degrees Fahrenheit, the gasoline vapors begin to evaporate out of the crude. Those are collected and then brought to the next phase of processing. At around 350, kerosene. 500 degrees gives you diesel vapors, and at the end you're left with this thick residual fuel oil that's used for industrial purposes like big blast furnaces and that sort of thing. The process is called fractional distillation, and it's more complicated than that, but you get the general idea. After the distillation portion, the processes get a lot more technical and a lot more chemistry is involved. There's processes like cracking and reforming are done, which treat byproducts of the distillation process and turn them into usable oil and gasoline products. There are plenty of other byproducts as well, like asphalt, plastics, and fertilizer, which result from the refining process. And after all these chemicals are processed, a lot of them are stored in those giant tanks. Unsurprisingly, oil refining is extremely complex, and I went to school for economics, not petroleum engineering, so we'll leave it at that for today. But if you want to learn more, check the appendix of this video. What I do feel comfortable with is teaching you the risks of living near one of these refineries. Study after study after study has shown that there are indeed risks, and in order to understand those risks, we have to understand the oil and gas industry a little better. It is extremely difficult to build a refinery in the United States or Western Europe. Not actually the construction, but the permitting and the approval process are nightmares, and as a result of that, the last refinery built in the US was built in 1976. Now, internationally, it's a different story. Like in India, for example, there's refineries being built right now. In the West, we've been closing our refineries. This is for a variety of reasons. Some companies cite lack of demand, others are turning their factories into biodiesel plants. But despite this, the vast majority of oil refineries that were open are still going to be open because they're already built, the infrastructure is already there. And instead of opening new refineries, they try to increase the capacity of their current ones. These current refineries also aren't going anywhere. Even if we were to all drive electric cars starting tomorrow, there's still demand for things like plastics, asphalt, fertilizer, not to mention boat fuel, jet fuel, etc. So refineries are generally here to stay. Additionally, these companies are going to do whatever they can to keep their refineries open, minimize downtime. The important takeaway from all that is that in the US, these refineries are old and they try to operate at maximum capacity as much as possible. Oil refineries run 24/7. There are plenty of safety checks and balances, but things slip through the cracks and accidents happen. I'm standing in front of the Torrance refinery, which exploded in 2015. The explosion was so large it registered as a magnitude 1.7 earthquake. This explosion was caused in part by a faulty valve that had slowly eroded over years of operation. Explosions like this are all too common. Since 2015, refinery explosions have occurred in California, Pennsylvania, Ohio, Colorado, and Texas. In 2005, at a refinery around 30 miles outside Houston, an explosion killed 15 workers, injured another 180, and caused $300 million of property damage. I was living in Philadelphia in 2019 when the refinery there exploded. It caused a 38,000-pound chunk of metal to fly across the Schuylkill River. Crazy. Even though these explosions are relatively rare, they do happen. And there are things that can still be done to prevent these explosions or to mitigate the damages caused by these explosions. For example, at my local Torrance refinery, there's a process that's undergone there called alkylation. This process happens after the distillation and converts some of the crude oil evaporate into alkylate, which gets added to high-octane gasoline. This conversion is done using hydrofluoric acid, or HF. You may know HF from Breaking Bad. It's what Walt and Jesse use to melt people's bodies after they kill them. The Torrance Refinery alkylation settler tanks have around 6,000 gallons of HF in them at any given moment, and further storage tanks nearby have another 25,000 gallons. This HF, when heated up, can cause sort of a ground-hugging cloud of poison gas. Here's the thing though, hydrofluoric acid does not have to be used in the alkylation process. It's just that the Torrance Refinery spent a lot of money to set up this process as it is, and it takes a lot of money to change it. But at a Chevron refinery in Salt Lake City, they did just that. So it is possible, but if these companies aren't being forced to change the process, they're probably not going to. And honestly, people don't seem to mind. The going rate for a house right across the street from the Torrance Refinery is almost $1 million. But let's pretend for a moment that you don't live next to the Torrance Refinery. You live next to a refinery that hasn't had any recent explosions and doesn't use HF. For example, the El Segundo Chevron Refinery down the street from me. Asking price for a house right near this, I'm laughing because it's crazy, $4 million for some of these. They're all of them are seven figures. These people have an active oil refinery that pumps out hundreds of thousands of gallons of crude oil a day right in their backyard. So what are the risks for them? Well, for starters, people who live within 10 miles of a refinery are statistically more likely to be diagnosed with lymphoma than someone who lives more than 20 miles away. And we can assume that if you're right next to a refinery, it's only going to get more common. Additionally, oil refineries are huge polluters, and virtually all of them emit sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, and particulate matter into the air. They also generally have pipelines or ships or some kind of delivery channel for crude oil to get there, which can fail and lead to oil spills. A lot of refineries also use water to cool things down, and there's really not super strict EPA regulations for the wastewater that comes out of these plants. They haven't been updated in over 40 years, and so discharge contains chlorides, sulfates, selenium, nitrogen, and other chemicals that just get leached into the groundwater. And people love to talk about chemicals. Chemicals. They're putting chemicals in the water and it's turning the frogs gay. Actually, there's a little bit of truth to that. I'll put a link. Anyways, no, but one chemical in particular that I can specifically talk about here is benzene. Benzene is a chemical produced naturally by things like forest fires and volcanic eruptions, and it's also present in crude oil. During the refining process, benzene is harvested to be used in the production of other chemicals that eventually end up as plastics, rubbers, and dyes. It's very useful, but benzene is also carcinogenic. Now here's the thing. Every time you leave the house, and probably in your house, you are exposed to small amounts of benzene. It's a component of car exhaust, tobacco smoke, and just general city air. But if you live near a chemical plant or an oil refinery, you're exposed to more of it. You can even be exposed if you live near a former refinery or a former chemical plant. Benzene has been found at over half of the Superfund sites in this country. So what does it look like? It's a liquid at room temperature, and it emits really toxic vapors. And so when it's heated, more vapor is produced, and breathing in large amounts of that vapor can kill you, or if for some reason you wanted to drink benzene, that would also kill you. But also, in smaller amounts, consistent exposure to benzene will increase your risk of cancer in the long term. The EPA estimates exposure to 0.4 parts per billion of benzene just in the air throughout the course of your life causes one additional cancer case per 100,000 people. Now, that's not a high probability, but also 0.4 parts per billion is not a lot of benzene. For context, when you fill up your car, you're exposed to 8.5 parts per billion of benzene. And so if you live near a gas station, you're almost constantly being exposed to smaller levels of benzene in the atmosphere. If you've ever pumped gas in California, that's why the nozzles have that weird kind of like a condom on them. It's to help stop the vapor from getting into the atmosphere. One study from 2021 looked at 129 operating oil refineries. They found higher than average quantities of benzene in the air at 118 of them. And around half of those refineries had benzene levels above 3 parts per billion. Now again, that's not a lot, but if you live near one of these, you're being exposed to that benzene constantly. And again, if you're okay paying $4 million to live near a refinery, that's great. But it's not just benzene. Depending on what processes go on at the refinery near you, you can be exposed to a whole host. Look at this list that's playing in front of my face right now. Depending on what goes on, any of these chemicals, and you can Google them, they are all harmful. You can be exposed to a lot of stuff. Speaking of, if there is an oil refinery in your backyard, there are some things you can do to determine how much of a threat it is to your health. And you may have some questions about a refinery near you. If it's safe to live near, what are you being exposed to? One good place to start is to look at OSHA or the U.S. Chemical Safety Board. They have databases of all the past accidents. Before moving to the Torrance refinery, I could have seen that it blew up a couple years ago. Before moving to the Philly refinery, I could see what's going on. Another indicator you can look at is the Nelson Complexity Index. This is a metric used more in the oil and gas industry, but it shows you how complicated the processes at a specific refinery are, how much is going on there. So, for example, in my neck of the woods, the El Segundo refinery has a complexity of 12, and it produces about 290,000 barrels a day. The Torrance refinery is more complex, with a rating of 13, but it has a lower capacity. Still, I think I'd rather live near the El Segundo refinery because it doesn't have a history of accidents. Thankfully, I don't have to live near a refinery, and you don't really have to worry about one being built near you if you don't already live near one, because they don't really build refineries anymore. I figured I'd end this video on a happier note, which is that the Philadelphia refinery that exploded in 2019 has been shut down, the land has been sold, and it's being converted to a 1,300-acre office park. It's not very exciting or sexy, but it is better than an oil refinery, so shout out to the people of South Philadelphia. But of course, not all refineries can be closed. We need oil, we need gas, we need all these products that they make. I just wish that they would be built not near huge population centers. I think we can expand ones that exist in places like Sinclair, Wyoming, and we can slowly start to decommission ones like in Torrance, like in El Segundo. And we can still work on safety improvements, right? Because there are people who have to go to these refineries every day for work. And workers at oil refineries have some of the highest rates of cancer, much more than just living near one. So, I mean, I don't know. I didn't really know why I wanted to make this video other than like, I live near these, I drive by them all the time, I see them, maybe you guys are interested too. So, that's all for this one. It's a little hastily put together, I just wanted to get this one out there. Stay tuned for the appendix. I found a lot of cool stuff when I was researching, but thank you and have a good one. Alright, so first of all, I used footage from two old movies. This one, The Evolution of the Oil Industry, and then this one, The Refinery Process, a shell film. These are both phenomenal watches. They're really cool vintage style, so go check them out. Also, a huge shout out to the USCSB. I got a lot of info from them, and also they have a crazy good YouTube channel. You may have seen it before, it's really popular. They have these awesome 3D videos, like 3D modeling videos of refinery explosions and all kinds of different chemical explosions and failures that have happened. So go watch their stuff if you want to learn more about like what causes these explosions at refineries. It is surprisingly hard, or maybe unsurprisingly, depending on who you ask, but it's hard to get crude oil just as like a regular person. I had to order this from Azerbaijan, which I'm sure puts me on a watch list. So I'm gonna open it and see what I actually ordered, because I have no idea what to expect. It's like $40 shipped. I found this on eBay. So let's see what we got. Just random paper. It's sealed. That's interesting. Yeah, that's probably crude oil. I don't really have a way to check. Cool. What's up, everybody? Ending this video with some meta commentary. First of all, I'm reading the script off the laptop, and after every line I look down and then I start saying the next line as I'm looking up. I know that I didn't want to refilm all of it. I would rather just post the video, but in the future I'll be cognizant of that because I do want to start making more videos on this channel. This is only my second one of the year, but I've been busy, and I will continue to be busy. 5 or 6 videos this year would be ideal, so stay tuned. I have all these ideas over here on sticky notes. So there's so many ideas that I have that I want to make videos about, and eventually they will come. They will come in time. So yeah, thank you. The last video I made about the Southeast Oregon was very well received. People liked it. I was very happy. And so I don't think this one will do as well because it's not as interesting of a subject for most people, but I wanted to make it, and so that's why I'm posting it. Yeah, also I don't think the appendix style is good for the YouTube algorithm because it cuts off the view duration. YouTube sees it as only watching 75% of the video if you just turn it off when the appendix starts. I don't think that's good, but I think I'm just going to keep doing it because I like it and it allows me to organize my thoughts better. So yeah, I definitely read every comment, so let me know what you think, and yeah, thanks for watching to the end of the appendix, I guess, or just the whole video. Just, I don't know, thanks for being here.